Hi there. So in part two, I left you with the question, what does this graph tell us? And you should have figured that out by now, but let me just clarify in case you have any doubts. And then the second question, what are the implications of these findings for practice? So it tells us that some children have a larger vocabulary than others, and it is to do with the background of the parents, the socioeconomic status, SES. So those of higher socioeconomic status, the children of parents from professional backgrounds, have more vocabulary faster than children of middle or lower socioeconomic status. But those children who are considered working class, I put that in inverted commas, have more developed vocabulary at an earlier age than those receiving federal assistance. This was a study conducted in the US. Federal assistance means government support. So those on benefits, if you will. And it's quite shocking that by the age of about 34 months, children from wealthy backgrounds have over double the vocabulary of children on benefits, and quite significantly more than those from working class backgrounds. So the implication of these findings for practice is that the quality of interaction does matter. The exposure to the language does matter. If you are a child of parents from working class backgrounds, manual labor backgrounds, it stands to reason that the language that your parents use will not be as sophisticated, and the variety of words will be more limited than those from a professional background, those who have gone to university, who have done their A-levels, who have followed an academic path. Yeah. So exposure does matter, and particularly good exposure to language is what we want to aim for in order to develop children's linguistic competence. There's another graph here which is saying a similar thing to the previous one, but again, I'll just give you a second. You can pause the video and try to answer the questions there at the top. What does the graph tell us about the reasons why some children produce more complex sentences than others, and what are the implications of these findings for practice? So you may not have been able to see at the bottom that we've got three lines in different colors here. The green line is parents are high school graduates, the red line is parents are college graduates, and the blue line is parents have professional degrees. So some implications for practice. Again, we can see that children of parents who have followed more academic career pathways, college in the US refers to university, and high school graduation refers to leaving school at the age of 18. So clearly, if you think about this from a practitioner perspective, it does matter whether the early childhood practitioners have a degree or not, because one would expect that those with a degree, based on the evidence here, would have more sophisticated vocabulary and more sophisticated sentences, and that is going to impact the children's language development. So the number of types of complex sentences, so it's not just about vocabulary, it's also about the sentence structure and how we structure sentences and how we structure our thoughts. because we often structure our thoughts using language. Okay, so just to summarize before moving on, parents who are more academic, who have more academic background, tend to have children that can produce a wider range of vocabulary and a more complex range of sentences than children who are not from academic backgrounds or from more impoverished backgrounds, if you will. So, how can we ensure that the students, the children from impoverished backgrounds, the children of parents who didn't go to university, don't fall behind those learners of parents who did go to university from wealthier backgrounds? We obviously don't want classes where children have varying different levels of language development. We want to ensure equitable outcomes for everybody. So one way of ensuring this is a technique called dialogic reading. And this is something that parents of children from impoverished backgrounds can do with their children. We still have libraries in this country, and you can take out lots and lots of books from libraries, and the child can select those books, and you can read those books with that child. And while I was living in Colombia with my daughter, Colombia is a Spanish-speaking country, the only exposure she had to English was through me talking to her and through reading to her. And even though she only had that exposure, when we got to the UK, she could cope with English. She was able to communicate in English. So this does work as a technique if it's carried out in the right way and with engagement from both parties. Yeah. One particular technique is called eliciting, where you ask the child to tell you what they see. And I would play a game with my daughter where there would be a hippo in the picture, and I would say, that's a really big pig. And then she would go, no, Daddy, it's not a pig, it's a hippo. Or I'd see a zebra in a picture and say, oh, that's a very stripy horse. And she'd go, no, it's a zebra, Daddy. So encouraging them to even correct you, the parent, and to demonstrate their own knowledge, and then eliciting from them, okay, what do you see here? What do you see here? How many do you see? What color is it? You can teach them colors. You can teach them numbers. So that's one technique which is useful. Moving on to nativism. Some key points of nativism are that it does explain why children will say things that they have never heard. So whereas behaviorism has no explanation for this, for children producing utterances that they have never heard any adults say, such as Daddy go to the shops and the cats eat at the mouses. Nativism would say that they are learning a pattern. They are still figuring out the rules. There is an element of imitation, but that's not the primary driver of the language learning process. The primary driver, it's stuff that's happening here inside the brain, the hypotheses that the children form. Obviously, this is not happening on a conscious level. The children have managed to figure out that for plurals I need es, and for past simple I need ed. But that only gets them so far. So they can learn those rules through exposure, but then they also need to learn that there are exceptions, that not all plurals add es. So mouse, mice, sheep, sheep. So there are exceptions which are going to bamboozle children. And going to Chomsky, Chomsky says that this supports the idea of a universal grammar. Basically, that children are hardwired to learn languages and that there are a set of universal principles which underlie all languages. Basically, all languages function in the same way, and children have a device, not a physical device, but a language acquisition device in their brains which enables them to acquire these rules. And Chomsky says that this language acquisition device atrophies or shuts down or stops working as well as we age, which is why it's more difficult for adults to learn new languages. The language acquisition device shuts down as we approach adulthood. And there are examples of this from history, which I will go to in a minute. But nativism highlights the importance of exposure, as do the other theories of language learning that we've looked at. Without exposure, you will not acquire a language. And the example that I'm going to show you very quickly is Genie. And again, this is a video that you can watch, so you can pause this video and type in that link and watch that video about Genie. And the questions here are, what happened to Genie and what does Genie's case suggest about language and development? So again, pause the video, watch the other video, and then come back to this video in a second. So the case of Genie. Throughout her childhood, Genie spent most of her time strapped to a chair in the back bedroom of her family home where she had little social contact or interaction with others. Now, this is obviously tragic, but you can imagine that researchers were falling over themselves to find out what this means for language learning. So she was forced to suppress all vocalization. So every time she spoke when she was an infant, she was told to stop it. At the age of 13, she was removed from this very abusive household. And at this age, her English was extremely limited. She knew her own name. She knew the words mother and father, the 4 color words, red, blue, green, and brown, the words no and sorry, and a few extra words such as door and bunny. And stop it was another word that or phrase that she'd learned, and no more. So, at the age of 13, that was the extent of her vocabulary. And even though her vocabulary expanded after she was removed from this home, she never mastered the grammar rules of English, and she never integrated successfully into society. Yeah, as I said, her vocabulary expanded, but she never became fluent in English. At the age of 18, for example, she could say, I want to think about mama riding bus, buy more applesauce store, teacher said Genie have temper tantrum. So an 18-year-old, that's the extent of their English, and that's their first language. Yeah, it's not their second language, it's their first language. And this tells us a lot. So if you are not exposed to a language at a young age, or the language that you are exposed to is very limited, that has implications for your future development, because as Chomsky theorized, there is a language acquisition device, and the principle use it or lose it applies in this case. If you don't use the language acquisition device, it will shut down, it will atrophy, and it will be too late to learn language. So these points are summarized here. I'm conscious that I've run out of time, and I won't make you watch another video. So thank you for your time, and here are the references should you want to follow up anything I've discussed.